Namaste. So, just to give a little background of this particular topic or title, this is actually a message which the mother gave to Jipma. So, when Jipmer was founded, I think 1960 or 62, the mother spoke of Jipmer as an extension of sorts, and she was asked to give a message. And she gave this message, Truth Cures. Of course, she gave in French, and the English translation is Truth Cures. So it's a very fascinating message, and when I came to know about it, I'm not sure if this message is there in the collected works, but I've confirmed this from the Jipmer authorities. And since then, I've been just wondering that what a profound and significant message this is. The truth cures. With that, if we go to a little background, there is another place where she says illness is a falsehood of the body. In fact, she says if illness is a falsehood of the body, then doctors are soldiers of truth. And medicine is a priesthood. So the profession of medicine she sees as a priesthood, and all the processes that a typical doctor is supposed to use in whatever branch. It's not about allopathy, homeopathy, Ayurveda. It's like a ritual. And through these rituals, we are actually invoking the healing power. So I found this image very, very powerful and very beautiful. And I'll come to it subsequently. But first, how is illness a falsehood? So, falsehood is basically that which either distorts truth, perverts truth, or it imitates truth. That is the other aspect of falsehood. So, all these three, it opposes the entry of truth. All these ways of falsehood which enter into the body at a certain point of time. When does it enter? It enters possibly, actually, it enters with conception itself, because even in the seeds of heredity, a false way, by false is meant there is a straight, direct law of truth which must unfold in the body. That's how we see in animals. So the body has been programmed in a certain way, and it should, in a normal logical course, it should live healthy, and after a certain point of time, going through 4 seasons, it would decline and pass away. For the soul to take other bodies. So this is how the nature has planned it. Disease, suffering, evil is not kind of in the original plan. I mean, it's there as a possibility. It's not an inevitability. So possibility is there, and that possibility comes in. So how does it come in? From conception itself, there could be many things to which the child is exposed in the womb. The body, while it is being formed, is exposed in the womb, and it could be from the thoughts and of the parents, their ambitions to their fights, quarrels. All these things are having an impact upon the body, and so by the time it comes, certain tendencies, traits have already entered into it, apart from what the child has brought from the previous life. This knowledge is not to give any kind of guilt to parents, but to understand, so that we can live better. And then as the child grows up, the more and more the natural instinct of the body, which is there given already to the body by nature, that begins to get corrupted. So for example, I have seen that children, when they grow up, they suddenly go through phases when they demand a certain kind of food. They need it. It's because their body has understand that there is this chemical which is required, and they, many children who do this pika, they eat lime from the wall. And now there is no lime, so there is no pika. But they used to take this lime. Sometimes they would like to eat little earth. So all this because the body has a natural instinct. This instinct is a reflex of truth. Just like in animal, this instinct is a reflex of an intuition which is given to the body, and because this body has developed over millenniums, trillions of evolutionary process, so it is endowed with certain instinct. That's how we have food, we have hunger, and we have thirst, and if there are natural tendencies, reflexes. But as this body is brought up by parenting, through the process of parenting, parents start introducing their own ideas, and that starts corrupting the file of the body. So the first level at which we find that falsehood begins to enter is when the child is very small, and we start consulting all kinds of diet programs. Nowadays we have very fancy diets, and I don't want to talk about them. So the mind believes that it can know better and do better. So we have all these fancy diets based on so-called studies, and as a result we start corrupting the natural instinct of the body at a very very young age. And so by the time the body grows up, I'm just talking of the body, it tends to already react in ways which it would not otherwise. There are strange possibilities in the human body which gets spoilt as we grow up. For example, children don't have this idea of tetanus. They don't have this idea of what happens when you fall. They don't have this idea of fear. This fear comes as they grow up. So I've read some very interesting instances that where when there was a blast and children fell from an aircraft, and children tend to have a much greater survival because the body has a certain plasticity. It just adjusts to many kinds of circumstances. It won't happen always, but it's a fairly common things. I've seen actually. I read about it and then went a little more into detail. Children who are brought up in a village with snakes all around. So for some reason or the other, they develop a rapport with the snakes, and there are hardly incidents of snake bite, and they grow up as if like they are one with nature. But tendency of mind is to cut ourselves off from nature. For example, one of the things that is happened in today's times is that we are cut off from the sun, and the sun is the most natural rejuvenator. Vitamin D, leave aside that, but even otherwise, sun is known to be an immune booster. But more and more, our habits, tendencies have got such with air condition and all that, that we have begun to slowly withdraw and cut ourselves as if we are separate from nature. We are separate from the totality of creation. So it starts reflecting in the entire range of lifestyle. But this is not true. So the first falsehood is that we are separate, and this whole creation is meant to just serve our needs. It may appear very strange because it's so natural in human, with the human mind. Whereas if from childhood we understand that, well, we are one with nature and we are part of her creation, there is a linkage between us and the whole world, life would be very different. And I can share a few examples from my own childhood. We used to go in the morning to pluck flowers for dad's puja, and we just 4 or 5 of us used to go, and we were instructed go barefoot. Now, today's times we can't imagine going barefoot because there used to be grass, and we were told that if you walk on the grass barefoot, it's good for the eyes and good for. And we used to go. We used to enjoy. We never had any issues, and there were two open wells from which we used to drink water, and we had developed even a rapport with the well, because one well was meant for bathing, another well was meant for drinking water. They were both open wells, and there were trees with which we could speak and communicate. Means not we were not speaking to the trees, but at the same time there was some kind of this that tree. Now there was a kind of connectedness with everything around. That connectedness over a period of time gets lost as we grow more and more into a kind of life where we have become more and more isolated and cut off from the rest of the world. So this is one level of falsehood which has become so prevalent in times that we live in. Now we are, of course, fortunately, a whole cycle is complete, the cycle of mind, and we are once again reconnecting. Many of the things, for instance, habits. I was saying the other day that we as children grow up eating with your hand, and we didn't know that it is non-hygienic because our hands and fingers were the things which we could clean ourselves to the extent that we wanted, which we could not ensure with spoon and fork. And apart from relishing the whole thing, it was something which automatically it's clean. It's you are eating in a plate where in southern side you also have the banana leaves and all this. So there was a complete connectedness. That connectedness, losing that connectedness is the first falsehood, because life is not like that. It is If we take the language of the Upanishads, then this is the sin. If there is any sin, now there is nothing wrong in an individual life affirming itself, but individual life affirming itself at the expense of the rest, that is where the problem lies. Because as long as the individual affirms himself, lives for, it has to do what it needs to do for its survival, for its even its affirmation, even its assertion. But it should be by taking into account this vaster truth of existence, that well, I am part of this all life and I have a right to exist and assert, but not at the expense of another other life forms. And now we can see that backlash has started. So most of these viruses, now there is a third virus, it's jumping from animals to humans. So there is that interconnectedness we lost because we started regarding ourselves as separate. Now there is a difference between individual and being separate. An individual can be part of a whole. My finger has its own unique function, each finger, and yet it is part of the whole. But if the finger begins to feel it is separate and distinct, that's where we have cancer, because it, in its effort to affirm itself, it begins to multiply and multiply and multiply and starts eating the resource of the rest of the body, and therefore we have a cancerous condition which needs to be corrected in different ways. So this first attitude, wherein one is that I am separate and the world is meant to cater to my selfish needs, and the other where I am part of a larger whole and yet I am an individual. It doesn't threaten my individuality; it enriches me. So this shift of attitude, incorporates itself in multiple ways, and it's too vast a subject to deal with. But this is the fundamental thing that the body must grow up with, not with this idea that everything around is a threat and everything around is a danger and everything around is going to, as if trying to finish us right from childhood. About food, I have seen nowadays so much. I have seen children grow up on, pure so-called organics. Now, the natural ways in which we grew, the mind is interfering with that programming. And this is not something healthy over a period of time. So, this is the first falsehood. Second level at which we find falsehood is where we have both individually in our own minds and life, as well as a very collective formations which are not good for the body and they need to be removed. For example, I have, in myself, I have had to work this out and still working. When you have a food which you like very much, there is a tendency to eat a little more. Now, your body doesn't really need it, but the vital pushes it pure by desire. Now, this desire, there is something very interesting. The mother says, desires irritate the organs. This is a study I have made upon my own body. It does irritate the organs. Excess vital energy, it tends to accumulate around the belly, and the belly tends to increase when there is this kind of a great drive, sometimes even ambition. So there is a tendency for desires to irritate the organ. It falsifies things. Greed tends to make certain cells grow abnormally rapidly. Fear also tends to make these cells grow. I have seen that certain cells which sometimes the nerves get entrapped and become a cause of chronic pain because the body is overreacting because of fear. In corona, we have had these deaths. Of course, if you ask people, well-meaning doctors, they know that fear and panic was one of the things, but they won't use that language. They will say, well, people panicked, we had a cascading effect. There were hyper reaction of the immune system because of which the lungs were attacked. The lungs did not die so much of the virus as it died because the body cells was attacking and destroying it. So why this happened? Because of fear. Now fear is not only an individual suggestion but collective suggestion. So we see falsehood coming from different sources. At one place the mother says that there are people, the moment they go to a hospital, she says she doesn't like hospitals much, and I mean it's my experience very much, both as growing up as a doctor and subsequently working in hospitals, that the atmospheres breathes of disease. It doesn't breathe of health. And at some point of time, I used to wonder that if there could be healing spaces rather than hospitals, probably they will come up at some point of time. But right now we have hospitals. Hospitals are completely disease oriented. And the moment you go, you will see a whole formation of diseases. The doctors, the diseases live in their minds. They are not only in the books. So the moment they see a patient, the mind begins to work. And I've seen very well-meaning doctors, they don't know the cause of certain diseases, and yet because they have learned it that way, they look at it only from one dimension. Probably if they didn't look at it as diseases but simply as disorders, there is a difference. Disease is something which you fix. There is a name, it's an illness. You have this particular illness. But another way to look at it is that there is a disorder, that's why there is an imbalance, and this disorder can be corrected by bringing in the consciousness of order and harmony. So that's where, Mother says that there are many certain diseases which we consider as very serious, but they are not serious from the yogic point of view. But certain other conditions which seemingly are not so serious, but they are very difficult to cure yogically. And there's a whole way of looking at life. Very often people wonder if yogis can talk about an illness, predict an illness, or cure it in a certain way. But for the yogic vision, it doesn't appear as an illness. That's the problem. If we ask a yogi that whether this is diabetes or hypertension, he will not, he can know about it because he can see the formation. But that's not how he is looking at it. He is looking at it simply as waves which are going in a disorderly way. Now we have given a name and we have fixed it. But that itself is a falsehood. So the yogi doesn't look at it and therefore he can cure it. Because he is not burdened with this idea, oh, this is an incurable disease. But on the side of the patient, there has to be a receptivity, openness, and faith. Countless examples which I am aware of in terms of how people responded to the mother's working, and that's why she said finally it is faith that cures. So, but by now our minds and our vital is so much tied up in this formation of illness. Even in this formation that everything must die, everything must decline, age will catch up. All these thoughts, there is a whole world of formations. And to get rid of this formation, because it's very collective, even if individually you try to get rid of it, there are people around. And I have seen that people have this strange tendency, as mother says, ignorant goodwill. So, often I met people who, the first thing they'll notice is, आपका weight ठीक नहीं है, बढ़ गया है या घट गया है, something or the other they will remark. It's okay, don't look at it. They will start looking as if they have an eye to pick up something which is in their eye not right. And they can implant a suggestion, and which is not a very good or healthy thing. So falsehood enters through so many doors. But one door through which it enters is unconsciousness. So we have, in yoga, in the yogic parlance, we have these four opponents of truth. So one is falsehood, then there is unconsciousness, there is suffering, there is death, of course. So all of them work in a combined way. So unconsciousness opens a door. We are not even aware that something is going wrong. We are not even aware that certain attitudes, certain tendencies, certain formations are attacking us, even habits. And therefore, through unconsciousness, the door of unconsciousness, falsehood enters. The other door, as I said, is suffering. There is a love for suffering. It may sound very paradoxical, but there are people who almost take they feel that they must suffer. I have met people with illnesses, and when you go to the core, you ask them, did you have death wish? Oh, I had it number of times. People don't realize that these things are having an impact upon the body. And every wish it goes into the subconscious store and stays there, and it will come up at a time when we least want it. So we are swimming in a mass of vibrations, many of them full of ill will, fear, adverse suggestions, and all these come to contradict the natural truth and the natural law of truth which wants to unfold in the body. So this is the second level at which we find illnesses coming up. And the third level is that whenever there are higher states, diviner states, they want to act upon the body to heal it. We see that there is a strong resistance in the body. Body is very closed, it's not open and receptive. So these are the three levels at which we see that falsehood enters and prevents the entry of truth. It's not only soul, but even the body is a battlefield. It is the Kurukshetra. So, what are we to do? How do we invoke truth? First is we must removing these formations, a formidable task. We should try to feel the body's own natural instinct. One of the things which is not again depends on each one, but it's not such a easy thing to do. But simply to go by the hunger. Now it's corrupted. I know about myself. I have fixed timings at which I must eat. But if you really go by, is the body really hungry? You discover that no, it's not hungry. How much is it hungry? It's hungry only for this much. But you want to eat because later on, it's something like a ritual one must complete. So to bring back the body's own natural instincts is the first task where we must remove all these. They come over years and years. For instance, in an Air Force setup, I have fixed mess timings. So I have to eat at that point of time. So, the body gets used to a certain pattern, habituated. And then it begins to eat purely by habit, not by hunger. So, to once again bring back, hunger is the natural instinct of the body which tells us in a true way what we need and what we don't need. Another, even about thirst, a lot of elderly people, they suffer, because they don't get to know that they are thirsty. With air conditioned setup, it is so common. One forgets drinking water because for some reason people believe that everything is fine. We associate thirst with heat. There is no heat, but nevertheless, the body needs water. So we should once again bring back these very natural instincts of the body, which are basically, as I said, they are reflex of an intuition hidden in the body itself. Our body contains it, and if we bring it out, its need for exercise, its need for rest, its need for food in a certain way, its need for water, these very few things it needs. And if you provide it, a lot of problems can be sorted out. That's what we call as a lifestyle change. Then there is a need to look very sincerely where are the hidden doors, where are the places, corners in which falsehood is hiding. It hides, the mother uses the word insincerity. Say for instance, there is a desire, late night party. I'm giving an example. So first there is a justification, oh I have to go for that party, oh it's a social thing. But none of these things is true. Something in the vital is attracted and drawn towards it. And it's only later on that if we are very sincere, we'll discover that, well, my vital is fooling me, it's playing a game. So one has to go deep. She uses the word, it's like a surgery. So we go deep, there is something hiding there like a little worm. There are two instances, which I know of, many of them, but two particularly, that someone went to the mother and complained about some problem in the abdomen, and she just looked, and the lady was saying it was like, my whole body was being scorched, as if, it was on fire. But then, within a few hours, everything went off permanently. Shobindu, where, he sees that little worm in the appendix area, it's wriggling, and there is a subtle hand which picks it up and throws it far away, and the person says, my pain is gone, my pain is gone. A third instance where the person himself told me, the first instance also directly I have heard from the person who was present in whom this surgery was conducted. And the third instance again, someone who used to experience suddenly, he used to have a lot of fear and he was having a series of dreams. So he went to the mother and said, I have a lot of fear, I have a lot of fear. Mother wouldn't say anything. And then suddenly on his toe, there was a big boil which had started coming up. And it was very painful. So he went to the mother and he showed this particular boil. And the mother looked at it and he says, my whole body was on fire. So it was like adding fire to injury, not salt to injury. Of course, this was a purifying fire. And then he goes and says, I am very afraid, very afraid. And the mother says, if you are so afraid, you cannot do yoga. Now he was in great agony that, look here, I have come for yoga and it seems I am unfit for yoga because of the fear. So then he goes and says, mother, what is the remedy? And she told him, you go away from here. And he says that as he started going away, by the time he had reached a little distance, 50% of his problem was gone. And then by the time he reached his village, 100% was gone. Of course, he eventually came back. He joined the ashram, and mother accepted. So there is this the way this falsehood works. It closes, shuts the doors to grace, shuts the doors to the action of truth. It takes that action of truth as something which hurts and tortures, whereas it is like a surgery which is being done upon us. So this is where these fears which we justify, call it very natural, normal. Fear is the greatest impurity, and the mind so often justifies it. And the doctors, further, more and more, they reinforce it. The books reinforces, the media, the newspapers reinforces. So it requires a great sincerity to observe. Greed, the cause of many tumors. Ambition, another kind of reason. Vanity, one of the causes for both psychological as well as physical illnesses. So to discover that there is vanity inside and to remove it, there are instances where people used to go into possession states, which of course in psychiatry we use different terminology, and I don't want to use those names, but then the mother would remove the possession, but then the person would feel, I'm now nobody. I have met such people. And because of the possessions, they started feeling they are somebody and someone. So they wanted this. There was this concealed vanity. And when you remove it, there is a tendency to call it back. And this falsehood works in strange ways. Even medicines, they do have an effect, because at the physical level, they do block the entries of these adverse forces. And then I've seen patients, when you use these medicines, because these adverse forces, these harmful forces, these vibrations are unable to enter in that spot, they enter in another way. And the person believes that, no, I must give up all these medicines. Stops the medicines, and then again the entry doors are open and there is relapse. So it's a very complex play of web of forces in which the human consciousness is caught. So what is the remedy? Of course, we can't isolate ourselves, and we cannot ultimately, not supposed to live a life where we are cut off from everything and everyone. So it's not even desirable. Besides, even that would not be the perfect way to live. There are instances yogi tried to do that, but that's not what we should do. So what is the remedy? Remedy is to surround ourselves in an atmosphere of truth. That's the most important thing. We should be bathing in that sea of truth every day. Take a dip, take a bath, so that all these formations are washed away. Two, three very simple ways to wash away this formation is, one is of course water. Water tends to wash away many of these formations. So morning and evening, if we take at least twice a bath, some people advise taking bath before night, and I think it's a very good practice, because the whole day's vibrations we wash away. So that's a very simple way. Air is another thing which through a free ventilation. See, in olden times, what was the advice? Though they didn't know the principle, when people had tuberculosis, they were advised to go to the mountains. Even now, people advise go to a place which is well ventilated. So, what happens when there is well ventilation? There is a free movement of wind, and the wind is another thing which drives away. Then there is mud bath. Now, very interesting, in some of these practices, we see there is a profound truth which is hidden. So, what does mud do? How is it that people take a mud bath and feel better? See, this is something which you have lost. As child, I can vouchsafe. There is such a joy in playing in the mud. Nowadays, of course, some schools are incorporating it, where children play with the mud. So how does mud help? So mud helps by, this, I know this was scandalized. Oh, it's very unhygienic. How does mud help? Falling in the mud, getting up. Then yes, you take a thorough bath. Nobody is saying remain in the mud. And it's not about dirt. There is a difference between mud and dirt. So when you bathe in the mud or play in the mud, nowadays these sand pits are created. Mud has this property of absorbing things. So many of the things which are harmful, mud, earth, it just absorbs it. And when it absorbs it, it is a kind of cleansing. You come, take a bath, and things are fine. Then there is another fourth way, is just exposure to the sun. It is being found now recently, I forget where, I was reading somewhere, that every day if you just sit with gazing at the sun with your eyes closed, of course, for maybe 15-20 minutes, it is such a good immune booster. So these are natural elements, and the balance is disturbed. That's how Ayurveda works on this principle of Tridoshas. So Tridoshas is basically Vad Pitka. What is it? It's basically there are five elements and they are disturbed. And when they are disturbed, there is a problem. Space, even physical space, the space we are living in, the space, there should be enough space. That's why in hospital we don't advise beds which are very close. The same happens in living conditions, and allow this little space. Now, obviously, in a poor family, it may be difficult, but always we can come out and then step out into the open fields. That's how many of these children rejuvenate when they come out and they run about. So we are beginning to discover some of these lost habits. And then, of course, the last is fire. Now, fire is something very interesting. Fire destroys a lot of things, but obviously, outer fire is out of question. Though the light of the sun is one kind of fire, it's an energy which heals. But definitely, there can be an inner fire, and that's where I come back to Mother's aphorism, where she says that medicine is a priesthood. So the doctors are priests. So priest always invariably you have this yagya in which things are being poured. So this aspiration in which we can offer things, this is the yogic way. So if one discovers that there is a desire, there is a greed, there is a physical illness also, and one discovers behind the physical illness what are the false movements and wrong movements, then one lights up this inner fire. Of course, we can't light the inner fire for this purpose. The inner fire is always for ascension. But the moment this fire which is lit up, there are three spaces at which this fire is found. One is in the home of truth, what Sri Aurobindo calls as the supramental. Of course, that is not easy to access, and that is working in its own way. The second, which is in the cave of the heart, this is the easiest place. And the third is in the depths of matter, which is how Kundalini practices work, because it awakens the fire, and this fire has a capacity to burn away the disease, the seeds of illness. What are these seeds? So it can even work upon the heredity factors. See, that is the whole story of Ashtavakra, who is bent at different angles. It can burn away even those seeds if sufficiently awakened. Now, Kundalini practices are specialized and definitely not recommended without a proper living guide. And in this yoga, we don't practice Kundalini from below upward, but from above downwards. But I have seen this, that as the force descends and as the centers open, in those areas, the false movements tend to be replaced by the right automatically. And when it comes down into the body, even the body begins to become aware of all the knots of falsehood which are there. And automatically a working starts, and things which we thought are normal, natural, and part of life, they begin to show us up those grains, slippery grains, and they tend to be rejected automatically. So this is the process. But at least the fire in the heart, that is something we can light up. And every day if we can sit, with this attitude, with this aspiration, that there is this fire which is burning. We can have an image, it's burning away all the impurities, my thoughts, feelings, physical movements, greed, desires, fears. Every time we have a fear, we offer it into the fire. Corona may happen. Okay. Offer this fear and the corona and the virus into it. It has an instantaneous effect. Even we can invoke the forces of harmony and order. I've seen when somebody comes in with what we call as infection, which is nothing but an invasion of the adverse forces. And you become aware, because as you grow in consciousness, you become aware. So just by that awareness, one can know whether this infection is of what kind, how serious it is. But when it tends to enter, you can feel a little dizziness, bit of uneasiness, bit of headache. Early signs may appear, sometimes a smell. So what is to be done? Just stay quiet inwardly. Close the eyes, just stay quiet inwardly. Call a whole mantle of peace. Peace is so curative and so liberative. So every day just to call peace. Just peace, 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 peace. Shanti, 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 shanti. Even in the organs, shanti, shanti, shanti. With regard to stomach, Mother says, catch hold of a peace deep within and push it deep inside the stomach. It is it just requires being little aware of the psychological movements. Why is the stomach getting irritated? By unkind thoughts. We have all held it inside us. So instead of burning somebody else, It is burning us. People burn themselves with jealousies. They burn themselves with hatred. They burn themselves with, unkind thoughts. So when we bring peace, so it's so curative. There is an irritation in the organ. There is any of the organs. There is pain, to just open it up like a knot and open to the light. All these are ways through which truth can trickle in. Just this light or peace. And this peace, if we invoke, it has an effect not only within us but in the environment. It means new ways of healing. If not today, tomorrow we are going to discover. So instead, but it doesn't work like, oh, I have a sinus, let me call truth. It doesn't work like that, because it's a formation we are having. In the vision of truth, it is not sinus. Oh, I have a heart attack, how do I invoke truth? Again, that's not the way to look at it. But just to hold the hand of a patient and just quietly call for peace, peace, peace. It is a part to get transmitted. It's like any other, if we form a link, we can send it even by thoughts, but we can do it much more concretely if there is proximity of physical space. So there are forces of truth which realign us. But yes, there is a tendency for us to go back to falsehood. That's the other part. Certain falsehoods are so deep rooted. Habitually, even when it has been completely removed, we have recovered, we have a tendency to get back. Now, that's a long story, which basically is the fight between the constructive forces and the destructive forces. So, particularly in times that we live in, we see there is almost a race between the divine constructive forces and the destructive forces. So here again, the more we align with destructive forces, they have a havoc upon our own body. That's why anger is harmful. It is harmful for somebody else, but it's harmful first for us. Because when we are angry, then we are releasing extremely destructive forces in the atmosphere. And if we go to the root of anger, we discover there is weakness. Weakness in the vital. We can't contain energy. So we immediately burst out. So it's like a pressure cooker effect. And we think we have released, but because we release every time, the same energy gets drawn into the vacuum. Some people feel very happy. Oh, they feel relieved after they have let off the anger steam. Yes, they are fine for some time. But because they have not replaced that empty spot with the vibration of truth and peace and light, so it's like an empty spot. By habit, the same force runs again into the system. Again, the same process follows. They release it, burst out. It goes somewhere. It goes into the world to create destruction. And then again, the same thing. And it's like a vicious cycle. Because every time it grows more and more. So, to replace the vibrations of falsehood with vibrations of truth. To replace hatred with love. Jealousy with love. Fear with faith. Anger with peace and strength. The reverse of anger is strength and peace. So love heals. Love is a vibration of truth. Again, harmony. To replace the disorder and chaos. I can say at the mind level, one can see how contradictory thoughts can remain in a person, and people are not even aware. I have seen people who speak about Sri Aurobindo, and in the same this thing, suddenly they will speak about Shankaracharya's whole, Mayavad, and they are very fine with it. Many kinds of contradictory elements. They must find their right place. It's not that anything is to be discarded, but it must be in its right place. And due to these contradictory movements inside, they begin to tell upon the body. So what do? We every day we should aspire. If we cannot aspire, we pray. If we cannot even pray, prayer is a beautiful thing given to human beings. I feel among the most beautiful gifts that is given to human beings is the power of prayer. I'm sure animals pray. Sometimes it looks like they pray, but they cannot articulate. Prayer is something articulated. Aspiration doesn't need to be articulated. So just to pray. Pray for peace, for harmony, for light, for truth. And then slowly the action of all these higher forces. Truth is supreme harmony and delight. One of the ways we can understand that the force of truth is weakening in us is by depression and sadness. We may give 100 excuses, but depression and sadness is a sign that we are plunged into falsehood. And what is that error that happens during depression? Acute egoism. The same malady from which we started. The feeling that I am separate and distinct from this whole creation and the Creator. It starts from there. I am all important to myself. So if we can replace this vibration with the vibration of harmony, harmony includes everything within and around. That's why one of the best prayers with regard to, there are set of peace mantras we see in the Upanishads. One of them, so it says that Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramya. Because I don't exist in isolation. If people around me are unhappy, unhealthy, it is going to affect me. So Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramya. Then again it says, may I hear the auspicious, may I see the auspicious. It's so beautiful because every time things enter into my eye, there is a tendency for my eye to take a certain angle of vision and see only that which is dark. And it indulges in pessimism. Same thing when I hear things. So instead of that, let me develop an eye for beauty in people, beauty in this world, beauty in the surrounding. There are some people who become cynics. Everything in the world is bad, horrible. So instead of that, to have an eye for beauty, to hear and pick up those notes, which are just the notes of beauty. There is a very interesting little experience that the mother recounts in the agenda when the Beatles group had come to play. They had 60s, this music had started. Normally we have this, this is so horrible. Of course, heavy metal is a different thing that took a different turn altogether. But when people went to the mother and they wanted to make a listen to the record of some of this music, she would pick up certain notes and say, this is beautiful. Even in that, you pick up certain notes. When we begin to see truth and we begin to seek harmony, points of harmony within us and in the world around us, then we begin to get healed. Because truth is supreme harmony and supreme delight. Truth is peace. Truth is love. Truth is light. It's not about a bare truth. Truth always sets things right. So this ability to look at oneself objectively and to see where there are things which need to be corrected, set right, with the eye of sincerity, not with the, some people get very depressed when they see it. No, the grace is there. It will take care of it. But our work is to discover it and put it in the fire. That is the yagya which is going on in the body. The body is, in fact, is described as human life as the house of sacrifice. This is actually the Yagyavedi or the temple. We want to put it any which way. It's the Yagyavedi. But there is no fire. Whatever little fire is there, we are just feeding to not the original priest, but to desired self. So desired self is not the real priest. It is the titan who has come and sat in place of the priest. Even the mind is not the priest, though the mind is like a substitute. When before in musical circles you will see this, that sometime when you go, when before the master has come, there are people who are setting the instruments right. And if you don't know, you feel, oh wow, here is the master, but master is yet to come. And when he comes, when the instruments are set right, then he starts playing. So mind is also not the priest in this house of sacrifice. The priest is the psychic being. And that's why the mother insists on bringing out the psychic being, because that alone can automatically heal, show us what needs to be seen, offer with this complete trust and reliance on the divine, that the divine will heal whatever be our present state, the divine can cure, he can heal, and he removes things from the roots. I'll close with these lines from Savitri. Ashwapati is performing this great sacrifice, and through this sacrifice Savitri is going to come down, and this sacrifice initially he does it for himself. It's Sri Aurobindo's 150th year, so let me connect it with that. So we see Sri Aurobindo performing a similar sacrifice, yagya, First, he prepares the ground in Baroda, then he becomes one with India, and the whole Indian nation becomes the house of sacrifice, with Sri Aurobindo as the main priest. And then he turns the whole earth into a Yajnavedi, and therein, he offers, performs this sacrifice through which things get purified, things get ascend, and so much so that he took into himself all the darkness that was there, because somebody has to play that role of offering all these things on behalf of humanity. So he becomes a representative of earth and humanity, absorbs into himself all the poison like Shiva, and offers it on the Yajnavedi that is lit in his heart. And his heart has become the whole universe in which all these things are poured in. And his body, of course, as a result of it, it's not because it's a tremendous force that he's bringing down into the system. But even when the body is not able to take it, it becomes a bridge for the greater consciousness, for the supramental truth to come down and at least give us a foretaste of the victory that can come by the vibration of truth. 5th December 1950, some people believe that it's the day when Sri Aurobindo departed. One can equally look at it as the first taste, foretaste of the victory of truth over death. Because despite the manifestations in the body continued to remain for a long time. It continued to emit a sweet lotus fragrance. It didn't show signs of degeneration for a long time. It was lit up by a pinkish golden light. So it was the first step towards the victory. Of course, the final victory is something which unfolded over a period of time, and that's not what we are here for. But if we can at least become a miniature priest, let this psychic being step forward and let it, because in this light only we can discover the falsehoods. The mind cannot. The mind is a convenient, mind often plays the devil's advocate. It will conveniently give justification, excuses to all kinds of ideas that it carries. Even scientific evidence will not convince it if it holds on to an idea. But if this mind can be, which is a priest in the making, is a temporary makeshift priest, if we can let the psychic being spring forward, then it begins to play the cleansing role. So in Savitri, Ashwapati at the end of the journey, in book 3 we see that now he wants even the surface consciousness and the body to be transformed. And that's when we see, then lest a human cry spoil the truth from coming in like slippery grains of sand. So what does he do? He tore desire up from its bleeding roots and offered to the gods the vacant place. So psychic can show us where the real roots lie. And the roots are all within us. They open the doors through various movements, through various misgivings, through various ideas, which are all a deformation of the truth that is meant to act directly. Even nature, as it is today, nature does not let us live in falsehood. But there is something still dark and perverse, which is there at the very root of things. It is this which springs up, and the result is illness. The subconscient, the inconscient. Otherwise, nature, even if we just allow ourselves to live by the flow of nature, leave aside something higher, leave aside supernature, that we have lost. That is the whole story of Tarzan, where human beings try to recover that state of purity. It's one kind of purity, where they are one with nature. They are not ridden with these mental choices and the consequent guilt and all those things. They live with nature, they flow with it. So there is a movement nowadays where people try to say being with nature. But we can't go back now. Once we have taken this step, we have to grow into the likeness of the gods. We can't go back to the animal state. And this growth into the gods, godlike state, we have to pass through this narrow gorge. But if we want to make this passage smoother and better and happier, relatively free of issues and problems and sufferings, then we have to let the psychic being step out and become the priest of the house of sacrifice that this body is. Earth must transform herself and equal heaven. but or heaven descend into earth native might. But for this high spiritual change to be, the heavenly psyche must put off her veil and step into common nature's crowded rooms and take the charge of breath and speech and act.
It's beautiful, Dr. Locke. Thank you. Wonderful session. Actually, I have a question. Basically, how do we reconcile the mother's words
Yes.
that illness is a falsehood to those instances and circumstances where illness serves a constructive purpose, like it's there to help people grow and progress, maybe in a twisted sort of way, but how do we reconcile those two circumstances?
Yes, yes. So absolutely. See, there are two ways human beings can grow. One is the straight path, the sunlit path. But there is the other backup plan. So difficult, challenging circumstances are backup plan. So the law of circumstances works this way. I mean, circumstances I include illness and the people one is surrounded with. So there are two ways to look at it. That one is that uh, you know if we are able to change inside, the circumstances change. Now, does the circumstances also mean that a physical malady which one has carried through seeds of heredity will change? I do believe it is yet to be proven fully, but to a large extent, at some point of time, it will change. But the body is the last, as you know, the vestibule, because body is the fortress which has been besieged by the inconscient. It has sprung up from there. So the inconscient is a very strong hold on the body. But other than that, if you talk about the circumstances of life in terms of the outer situations and things, yes, certainly if we change within, the circumstances change. But if we don't change within, the circumstances become more and more difficult. That's how I look at it. And I've had several instances. I'll give you two, just two instances of very recent, several of them, but two which come into my mind. Two, three, in fact. I was recently talking. One instance is where there was this mother and daughter who were always fighting with each other, and both were miserable as a result of it. Then the daughter, in around 60s, she developed strange kind of neurological illness, but its eventual diagnosis was a kind of Alzheimer's. I'm not fully convinced about it, but nevertheless, she started going downhill. But what happened in the process? That suddenly her inner soul's beauty came out. So this is something still I see, and the mother was very initially disturbed. The friends were very disturbed. I just see, look at her soul. Just look at her face. The way she radiates that inner joy and beauty. She cannot calculate. She doesn't, solve complex mathematical problems. Yes, before that she could do it, but she is perpetually in one of the most beatific states that I have seen in people. Full of goodwill, full of generosity. No more any quarrels with the mother. The mother herself is surprised. Her whole attitude has changed toward the daughter with whom she used to fight. So this is one way, one instance I have seen. So I have seen number of people, going through dementia, even physical illnesses, going through paralysis, where they discovered that, well, because of this, their inner being had a chance to come out. I know one specific instance where somebody went through a stroke, and he said, I was very restless and I used to just run around, and but deep within, this flame was there was this need, and this suddenly sprang up in and came in the forefront, because one couldn't run around because of the paralysis. And the last 10 12 years, that person really believed that, look, I mean, because this was a grace to me, that I've been literally pinned to a small limited I mean, he could move out. People could take him in a car, but that's not the point. He said that I could take it as a very beautiful message and a lesson. Now here the body to an extent got healed in the process, but more importantly that he took a leap forward and progressed. So subtly circumstances which may seem very often paradoxical, one, they come to show us something, and if we really look carefully we'll discover that the law of circumstances, they are what they are because something in me needs to grow. Now I am leaving it open ended what it means to grow. It is not about changing circumstances, about changing within. Very frankly, when we change within, it doesn't matter. The circumstances may change or don't change, but we have learned the lesson and we have grown. So that's how I look at it in our present state of evolution, which includes illnesses, which includes physical illnesses. Psychological illnesses are a bit difficult because while we can be objective toward the body, it's far more difficult to be objective towards the psychological processes because we are so much identified with the mind.
But the mother's words are very emphatic. All illnesses are a falsehood.
Yes, absolutely.
All illnesses are a
All
falsehood.
illnesses are
And
false.
just reconciling that with this other situation is it's quite it's. I think you need to go in really deep inside into this one.
Yes, yes, absolutely. All illnesses are falsehood.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Love. Beautiful session.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.